Yes, they do.
Nope. Okay. I will speak loudly. Good afternoon and welcome to Temple Beth Tikvah. We're so glad to have both of you with us, but Lana Melman, to hear about the book that you've written on a topic that I can tell just from listening to the buzz before you came into the sanctuary, it is on all of your minds. And Cheryl Dorchinsky with the Atlanta Israel Coalition, I know you will be helping to facilitate the conversations about this book and the topic that are so important. So we welcome you to Temple Beth Tikvah. I'm glad you are all here, and I'm sure at some point there is going to be opportunity for dialogue and people to ask questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cantor, for opening your gorgeous home to us. And thank you all for being here. I definitely want to thank our promotional partners, Liberate Arts, which is Lana's organization, Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation, the Weber School, St. Louis Friends of Israel, CAMRA, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, Augusta Jewish Museum, B'nai B'rith, Southern Jewish Life, and Israel Insight. I'm Cheryl Dorchinsky, and as it was mentioned, I am Executive Director of Atlanta Israel Coalition. I am also very active in the End Jew Hatred movement. And I'm here with Lana Melman, and she's the author of Artists Under Fire, the BDS War Against Celebrity Jews in Israel. And I believe you were going to start by reading us a little bit from there, right?
Yes. Can you guys hear me? Oh, perfect. Yes, thank you all so much for being here. It's so important, I think, that we talk about what's going on and mobilize, because the time is now. So I want you to read the first 2 pages of the introduction. I think it will help set the stage a little bit. And then we'll segue, and Cheryl will ask some questions, and we'd love to hear your questions as well. I was introduced to Jew hatred many years ago. My mother taught me about the Holocaust when I was just 9 years old. My grandmother whispered terrifying stories about pogroms in her native Russia. My dad talked about growing up in Los Angeles, where the signs in shops and restaurants said no Negroes, no Jews, no dogs allowed. The parents of a grammar school friend were both survivors who met after the camps. Crude ink numbers peeked out from my friend's mother's cotton sleeve as she made us sandwiches for lunch. Her dad's tattoo was visible on hot summer days when he puttered around the house in a t-shirt and shorts. My parents explained to me that we Jews had to live in our own neighborhoods, go to our own schools, and join our own clubs because we were not welcome in the non-Jewish neighborhoods, non-Jewish schools, and non-Jewish clubs. My parents were willing to accept the discrimination they faced in American society. They did not go where they were not wanted. They were of the same generation as the Holocaust survivors who were part of their community and who wore the scars of Jew hatred tattooed on their forearms. My dad fought in World War II, and the murder of European Jewry was personal to him. Millions of Jews, men, women, and children, fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters, perished in the ovens and the killing fields of Europe during the Second World War, victims of the Nazi regime and the indifference of their neighbors. While I was raising my children and working in Hollywood as an entertainment attorney and then creative executive turned writer-producer, I wanted to believe that the dark cloud of anti-Semitism had finally passed over us. After all, doors that were shut to our parents were open to us. Israel was hailed as a miracle by Jews and admired by all. I was wrong. I was unaware that the strains of anti-Semitism were creeping back into universities in the West in the form of anti-Zionism. I did not know that a coalition of individuals and organizations called the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Campaign would seek to isolate Israel, the only true haven for millions of Jews across the globe, economically, academically, and culturally, as a path to its ultimate dissolution. I never imagined that this politically motivated campaign would use the celebrities of artists to spread destructive lies about the Jewish homeland and poison hearts and minds across the world. Jew haters today have weaponized culture, and Jews everywhere need to pay attention to this now. We are a diverse people leading different lives, but when the sky darkens with hate to the rest of the world, we look amazingly alike.
Thank you. That's very powerful. I guess, my first question was what motivated you to write Artists Under Fire, but it seems that it may have been what you just mentioned.
Yes. And I'm interested, just by a show of hands, how many people in this sanctuary are concerned about the rise of global anti-Semitism today? Yeah. It's something I think that we speak to each other oftentimes in hushed tones. People from across the political aisles, both sides, sort of lower their voices and say, yeah, it's really bad. So I became motivated to write this book. I had already spent 9 years or so working to fight against the cultural boycott campaign. And what makes the cultural boycott campaign so dangerous is its ability to spread vicious lies about the Jewish people. Violence against Jews, hate against Jews, discrimination, expulsion is always preceded by vicious lies against Jews. And we could talk later in more detail about what BDS is, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions campaign is. But what makes this facet of it so incredibly dangerous is that it hijacks the celebrity of artists and entertainers to spread disinformation and lies about the Jews of Israel. And it is poisoning hearts and minds around the world.
So I know you talk about it in your book in quite detail, but how would you say they get to target and manipulate artists and celebrities? What exactly do they do? Short version, like I said, I absolutely love your book. And I love the fact at the end of each chapter she has like things that we can all do as individuals to help. But going back, like how does this actually creep into our entertainment industries? And you could use Roger Waters as an example because we just did a program on Roger Waters, and it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. But I'll let you continue.
What happens? The BDS campaign is a politically motivated anti-Semitic campaign that is disguised as a pro-peace movement. So they hide behind and they use the language of peace and the progressive left to veil their agenda. And their agenda is the elimination of the Jewish homeland in our ancestral home. So how do you get the message out? How do you get people thinking, conceiving of the idea of eliminating a viable, recognized country that's been in existence for over 75 years? Well, the best way is to constantly challenge its legitimacy on every front. And what happens is that artists, when they travel internationally, if they're going to a concert in Israel, or an Israeli artist is going to display their fine arts in London, or an author is going to a university in Canada that's affiliated with a university in Israel. That is always announced. It's always announced because they want the public to attend. It usually gets a lot of fanfare. That gives these anti-Israel, anti-Jewish activists an opportunity to seize on the newsworthiness of the event. Artists are media magnets. That's why they are signed to do ads for different products. That's why people want them to come and head their galas and speak at their gala events. Because if you can have the physical presence of a celebrity or their name or the likeness attached to your events, it catches people's attention. So what they do every time they announce their events, BDS activists swing into action and they start writing statements, petitions, social media posts. They organize protests when musicians in particular go on tours. So as they go from one place to another, you know in advance exactly where they're going to be. They can arrange protests outside of their events. And each time they do that, it is newsworthy to mainstream media as well as social media only because the celebrity's name is attached. And what I'm talking about, there's a misconception out there that celebrities and entertainers have turned their back on Israel. It's simply not true. They want to go there. The vast majority do not approve of or like the boycott movement. They are being used as pawns. So the petitions themselves become newsworthy because they are addressed to a celebrity. And when two celebrities are involved, like Roger Waters, who was one of the co-founders of Pink Floyd, when he's involved and the news story could read, Roger Waters and Pink Floyd co-founder Nick Mason are urging John Bon Jovi not to go to Israel because they claim it's apartheid. Every single news publication picks up this story because you're talking about a great war between two famous people, three famous people in that instance. And every single time, the lies that the false accusations against Israel gets repeated. So what this has come down to is it's a campaign of demagoguery. They use emotionally evocative lies that defame Israel. And then they tell the artists in the public square, if you go to Israel, which they claim is apartheid and racist and genocidal, that means that you are supporting these things. So it's a combination of demagoguery and a public shame campaign.
What I found interesting, the example you gave in your book, one of the many examples, was the Alicia Keys one, where it wasn't, you're supporting apartheid or occupation or any of those lies. It was, I'm worried about your safety, right? Wasn't that the goal Walker had?
No, I think you're thinking of Paul McCartney.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There was a hater, and then
Yeah.
there was an artist.
Yeah.
And the excuse was, I'm worried about your safety. It was a public statement. Please don't go to Israel.
It was actually a threat. It was Paul McCartney, you should not go to Israel because you will not be safe there. That's a threat. They claim to be a peaceful movement, but in fact, they threaten artists personally, their reputations, their careers, and oftentimes it spills over to actual threats against them physically. There's this one woman, young girl, Sarah McTiernan, who was participating in Eurovision in Israel. And she was one of the few people. Most artists want to keep it quiet because they just don't want all of the negative publicity. But she came out and she said that she got literally hundreds of emails. People saying things like, I know where you live, you're not safe, very explicit threats to her physical safety if she participated in the Eurovision contest in Israel. So and in Alicia Kay's case, that was awful. I was right in the eye of the storm of that one. It was so multifaceted. Most of them are multifaceted, but the bigger the star, the more facets you can have, because she had a charity that she was associated with. So they made a big to-do about getting a petition, and her charity is associated with helping children. She really cares about that. And so they made a big to-do about walking up the stairs of the organization of her charity and presenting her with a report that said Israel tortures children and abuses children. And the interesting thing is, well, it's not interesting, it's frightening, is that no matter what the artist's passion is, whether it's the environment or indigenous people or saving or helping children, no matter what it is, they will tailor their rhetoric to appeal to the artist and imply that they are being, not imply, say they are being hypocritical. If you really cared about children, you wouldn't go to Israel. If you really cared about clean water, you wouldn't go to Israel. No matter what the issue is that's close to the artist's heart, Israel is bad on that issue.
So why do you think artists buy into this?
I get asked that a lot, and I want to reiterate, very few do. There was a period of time where I tracked every single international artist who was scheduled to perform in Israel. Every single one, and put it on an Excel spreadsheet. Contacted, by the way, all the representatives, and to assure and try to answer questions and make sure that they stayed on track. At the end, and each one, with very rare exceptions, received some sort of intense pressure to cancel, to boycott Israel. At the end, about 5% ended up canceling their concert dates. Half of that 5% did so for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with BDS. Illness, and at one point, like a war had broken out, there was a conflict, and people were concerned about their safety. Okay, so now we're down to 2.5%. Of the 2.5%, the vast majority, or I'd say half of those, did so with absolutely, they admitted that it was because of BDS, but not in support of BDS. They would make statements, a lot of it was public, a lot of it was private to me, where they would say they didn't feel safe. That managers would say they are attacking my client's career that he spent 25 years building. Another one told me, I actually told a concert producer who told me, he said, it's not worth the safety of my bands. I'm just not worth the trip. So that is not in support. The vast majority keep their concert dates, and they do so at what represents cost to themselves. Their names are being dragged through the mud. They are being accused of the same hellacious lies that the Jews are being accused of.
So,
I didn't answer your question, though. But you can ask another way.
I was just going to say, from what you're saying, it sounds like, and I think your book mentioned it, that the BDS supporters claim everything is a victory regardless. How do we know what's true and what's false? Who supports and who doesn't?
Well, one way, first of all, you'll get a great feeling by reading this book. This book also helps you sort that out. I put out a newsletter in which I talk about current events and put that in perspective. Explanation, because what comes out first is the cancellation, and BDS always likes to trumpet that as a victory. But that's not necessarily so. And in fact, one of the things I try to explain in the book, there's a chapter which talks about the continuum. Yes, there is some support for BDS. It does exist in the artist community. But it's on a continuum. And one of the people that I have a lot of rachmanis for are the people who cancel for other reasons and are reluctant to say anything. I don't think that's right. I understand why they don't want to say anything, because they just don't want to be in the line of fire anymore. But I challenge them. And I think that it's proper to challenge them and ask them to do the right thing and to speak out.
So anyone who's been to Israel knows that most of the things that they claim are absolutely false and just pure Jew hatred. In your opinion, is it better to ignore this or push back?
I think it's essential to push back. And one of the things I like to say is, one of the reasons why they don't want artists to go to Israel is because then they would see that they're lying. Because all you have to do is go to the beach in Tel Aviv, right? You walk anywhere around Israel and you can see their claims of apartheid are a lie. So artists can see it with their own eyes. That's why so many of them come back and say glowing things about their experiences there. So I think it's essential. The other reason why, and this is where you guys all come in, is in this pushback. Because at the moment, BDS is rewriting history and determining the future. And we have to push back. And it's just not people who are leaders in the advocacy world. It really has to be a communal effort. We need to, number one, we need to reflect back positive messages to artists who go, positive messages to artists who speak out and denounce BDS, who support Israel, who have uttered expressions of love. We need to support them. And that's another thing I do in my newsletter, is I let you know who's gone, and I give you their contact information. So you can either go on social media or you can write a thank you note. So that's one way. And the other thing that I think that when I sat down to write this, I had been working for the last, 5 years, 6 years before that, very much in the public discourse, and writing a lot of opinion pieces that took one issue, one current event, and tried to extrapolate and talk about an underlying issue that was going on. But this is not a soundbite topic. This really someone needed to make the case against BDS. And there is an entire chapter that I think is essential for people to read. And I do like a comparison. This is a classic anti-Semitic trope, which we all know means a lie, anti-Semitic lie that has been levied against Jews for hundreds of years, thousands of years. And then I do a comparison to BDS messaging, and specifically among entertainers and in the world of entertainment. Because the focus here is, again, I think, how dangerous this particular facet of BDS is. So I think the most powerful thing we can do is call this out for what it is. When they talk about Jews stealing land, about greedy, thieving Jews stealing Palestinian land, that is no different than the age-old accusation of greedy, thieving Jews stealing everyone's money, right? That's one of the classic anti-Semitic caricatures of Jews, about Jews being bloodthirsty, having killed Christ, using the blood of young Christian children to make matzah, to killing innocent, right? That's what evil, bloodthirsty. How is that different than the BDS charge that Israeli Jews are murdering innocent Palestinian children? That's what you see over and over and over again in their messaging. We have to call that out for what it is. That's Jew hatred. And the thing is, the wonderful good news is that it's effective. When you draw that correlation and you speak directly to artists, it alters, it has an impact. I've seen posts deleted, I've seen retractions made, people sort of going underground, backing off. Well, I didn't really mean that. I didn't. Yeah, because we have to call them out on it. We don't need to have you don't have to know everything there is to know about Israel. You don't have to be totally up on every single current event. You just have to know, and I outline it. There's 4 things in the book that I tell people is the only things that you need to really take into your soul to feel grounded and really empowered in this battle.
Well, you basically put BDS on trial in your book.
Yeah.
It's very impressive. And I know you mentioned the SodaStream incident in there, which I won't go into detail, don't want to be a spoiler alert, but the question I have is, have you seen any evidence that BDS actually helps the Palestinians? Like, they claim that that's a movement to be helpful, but I haven't seen anything. And I know that with the cultural boycott, have you? Do Palestinians celebrate that?
I have been, well, what she's referring to is in 2014 Super Bowl, Scarlett Johansson was the brand ambassador for SodaStream, which is an Israeli company which had one manufacturing plant in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank area. And so I was, again, in the eye of the storm of that one too, and I tell the story in this book. But at the end, SodaStream pulled out, I don't remember how many years later, ended up closing that factory. And over 500 Palestinians lost well-paying jobs. I've been so in the thick of this. It's like every day I'm reading this material, seeing their propaganda, hearing their lies. I've never heard them make the slightest suggestion of anything that would actually help the Palestinians. Language is really important. I think we all really understand that. I never refer to them as pro-Palestinian because they're not. They're anti-Israel. Every single thing they say and do is about demonizing Israel. Never seen a suggestion about let's raise money and get kids in Ramallah musical instruments. Let's Please donate part of your concert proceeds so we can get kids in Ramallah and in Jews in Tel Aviv to work together and putting together a theater production. Let's create collab. No. And in fact, every attempt by any celebrity or entertainer that wants to do that is roundly rejected. Roundly rejected. Everything they want begins and ends with getting rid of the Jews. That's the goal. Not peace, not prosperity. In fact, I mean, they turned down charitable donations. It's like, no, we're not going to accept your money to help Palestinian children if you keep your concert date. It's really awful.
I know some of you may have some questions. I was going to ask if we could wait, but we could take a break and ask them. So I'll bring my mic over to you. I'm just going to go.
I'm wearing the T-shirt.
He is, the Unjew Hatred T-shirt.
Thank you for coming.
No.
My question is this. It sounds like BDS is a very structured organization. I don't know if it's a legal structure behind it with funding and all that. I guess a couple questions. One, is there a formalized anti-BDS organization out there, or is it just a combination of the good-heartedness of Jew hatred and AIC and other organizations to fight it? And with that, when you do push back, so you're in the entertainment and the media side of things, when you say we need to push back, is it pushing back against BDS or getting in front of band management and artist management before the negativity is pushed in front of them? How do you do all that? You see where I'm trying to understand how all this?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll answer the second question first because I remember it better. So, initially, there are groups, an organization I used to work for that does contact, and I used to contact entertainers before they went to Israel and just prepare them for it. Now the fact is that preparation, no one's surprised anymore. Back in 2011, entertainers were shocked that they would be stained with charges of apartheid by performing in Israel. Now it's public knowledge. Everybody knows what to expect. So yes, there's an organization that does that. I think that's an important part, but that's not sufficient because the real danger is not preventing cancellations. That's not where the danger is. The danger is, the threat is that they are poisoning hearts and minds around the world, even when artists go to Israel, keep their concert dates, speak out against the pressure to boycott against them, because that gets picked up as a news story. When John Bon Jovi says, yeah, I heard about, the boycott campaign, but I told my people I want to go to Israel and I'm going. That makes news. And what gets reported in the story? The charge that Israel's apartheid. The story is BDS and these individual groups are asking John Bon Jovi not to go because, and then it's lie 2, 3, 4, 5. But John Bon Jovi says, no, I'm going. And what was the other thing? Oh, in terms of the...
Well, the structure and fighting back.
Yes.
Against, BDS. So when you say we all need to do something, I mean, social media is fine, but I would think going after them.
It is not...
Professionally, financially, any other way you can.
Well, first of all, again, we have to separate out. I think you're thinking of people like Roger Waters, who are advocates for BDS. That's one group. I call them zealots in my book. That's one group. But then the vast majority of other artists, their managers want them to go. Their managers are knowledgeable. Beating them up serves no purpose. What they really require is support. And if you don't think it makes a difference, I just heard a couple of days ago, Dave Chappelle was booked at a forgive me, I don't remember what city it was, for his show. And you know, he's been in a lot of hot water with the LGBTQ plus community. And that event site received a statement or a petition with 126 signatures. They canceled the event. They canceled Dave Chappelle. Now, Dave Chappelle went ahead and found someplace else that would host him. But what a message that sent. 126 people. If you don't think that you have power to make a difference, if you don't think that your notes and your emails and your positive notes make a difference, you're wrong. I started off when I would see petitions that were like ridiculous. First of all, when someone signs a petition, you really don't know how many people have signed, because people have set up different email accounts. So one person, right, could sign it 6 times. You never really know, but you would see like, okay, 36 people, 75 people. Well, now those numbers have grown and there is a momentum to it. You have to sign stuff. You have to, a lot of people don't like social media. I don't like social media. I say pick one. You don't have to do much. You follow certain people. You like, you share, you're done. Next, you like, you share, you're done. And that's what happens. When these artists look at their social media and they see they're going to Israel, and there are now, like, let's say, 90, or even if it's more than that, let's say it's like 300 negative comments. And on the other hand, they see like positive support from 20 people. That impacts them. There's no reason why the people here today cannot make a difference. There's no reason. And that's what it takes. It's not about ganging up on managers. They want them. Think of it from their point of view. Why would you lose a market? Why would you lose a market? And in Israel, unlike most of the rest of the Middle East, their performers can sing and dance and do whatever they want, wear whatever they want, say whatever they want, go wherever they want. Why wouldn't they want to go? They want to go. They want to go. So what they need, the ones that are going, need our support. The people who support BDS are a different matter. And again, there is like one of the things I try to do, because this is, I think what you'll get as a takeaway is that it feels so much more simple when you read the book and it's laid out than it comes across in a conversation like this, where we're pulling from different sections. This really lays it out for you so you can understand how this works and really how powerful you are.
Thank you. Tova is taking questions, so if you could pass.
Probably don't need a mic, I'm sure I'm loud enough.
Well, it's for the people watching at home.
So I really admire your advocacy for ending or trying to help end anti-Semitism. Being here in the South, we're very much removed from the ongoings in Hollywood. So part of my curiosity is when Mel Gibson went on his vitriol of anti-Semitism, it seemed as if there was a big anti-Mel Gibson movement among Hollywood producers. I don't know if that was real or perceived. I know Mel Gibson is wealthy enough to have his own production company. He still goes about making his own films, et cetera, et cetera. Is there not a similar movement for, and it sounds as if you're more primarily involved in the music industry, correct me if I'm wrong, versus the acting industry. Is there not a similar movement amongst the promoters of musicians, whether it's, for instance, Adam Levine comes out very strongly in favor of Israel. So that's my first question. Is there not, and I guess I'm curious to know more about your leanings. Is your primary professional career focused on representing actors, musicians, et cetera, as an agent, or is this strictly an altruistic pursuit of yours because of your upbringing, et cetera? So the final conclusion of that is, I admire the niche that you're going after with these actors, musicians, et cetera. From my perspective, being here in the South and being the child of Holocaust survivors, the real threat to Israel and this BDS movement gaining a voice is from politicians and from people like members of the Squad. So I'm curious to know how politically involved you are and whether or not you're finding that to be an avenue of being involved in, or whether you consider that to be of value to your movement.
Okay, well, I would say probably the one thing I wasn't was a representative. I was never an agent or a manager. I started off as an entertainment lawyer. I worked at Columbia Pictures Television, which got bought out by Sony. And then I worked as a business affairs negotiator at CBS. I quickly, after about 3 years or so, transitioned to the creative side, which is where my heart was. And for many, many years, I was a creative executive, primarily in comedy development at places like Warner Brothers Television and Paramount Television, where I headed the division, if you will, which was comedy, and Paramount was a comedy house. We had, I think, 11 shows on the air at the time and lots of new development. And then I became a writer-producer, so I went all the way over, which I loved, and I did that for many years. So yes, are organizations. There's one that I worked for that when I first came on board in 2011, that organizes more of the behind-the-scenes players, so that when artists who are under fire are feeling skittish, that we could reach out through our connections and provide them with information and facts. So that definitely exists. But, and this goes back to, I think, Steve, and your question earlier, is there an organized counter movement? And what is the movement for BDS? Well, the main organization is the BDSmovement.com. It's obviously an online site. And there they have lots of tools and material for different organizations all around the world. We are living in a time where people don't need to have a meeting in a boardroom to come to an agreement. What we're looking at is more like, I think I would analogize it a little bit to a federation, where there's anti-Israel groups all over the world that have started locally, and they use the BDS network as a source of information about what's coming up, where they need to focus their attention. There are some that are more active than others. The most organized BDS group among entertainers is something called APAC. It's Oh, oh God, I'm so used to.
American Israel Public Affairs Committee.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I didn't quite hear that, but I think you got it. So yes, they actually have quite a few people. It's really UK centric, and there's quite a few people in the UK and Europe in particular, but England and all over the UK that are signatories. I think at my last count there was like 1,350 signatories to that. But also you have to bear in mind that a lot of those people who have sworn to boycott Israel will never have a cause to go to Israel. They may be a lighting technician in theater. And there's, so promise never to go to Israel, to boycott Israel, is really a formality. But I think, yes, there's been a dearth of organization within the anti-BDS community. But you're seeing almost all of the organizations now, the Jewish organizations and pro-Israel organizations, are fighting it in their own way. And one of the things that the End Jew Hatred movement does is an attempt to bring us all together under an umbrella. I don't mind that we're all doing this in different ways. I think of the pro-Israel community as tiles in a mosaic. We can all, each of us, do our thing, and we are contributing to a larger picture. I wish it would, my hope is that End Jew Hatred will take off, and that all of it will continue to emerge, I should say, because it is drawing a lot of support.
It's true.
And I think it's a great opportunity because it's a movement, and it doesn't mean that any of us have to diverge from our area of specialty. But I think that's the way of the future. We have to get it out there. I think it's a very powerful call. I don't know how anyone can say they're against ending Jew hatred in our lifetime, and all of our work contributes to that.
Oh, I'm sorry, just give me 1 second. I was going to say that, you don't know how people can say that, but even this event today that we're all at, and you're watching at home, thank you for coming in from all over the world, and our partners, we received a tremendous amount of hatred, which is kind of ironic because it's put on by the End Jew Hatred movement and the Atlanta Israel Coalition and the kindness of the shul to open their doors and allow us into their home. We have to have security. I mean, it's such a crazy world we're living in that we can't feel free to walk into a shul without security. You get nervous. Here in the United States, where we're supposed to have religious freedom. But I'm going to get off my soapbox and let you ask your question, sir.
Well, I'm Jewish, and I want to say that I'm very proud of my Gentile wife, who was the first Christian that AIPAC hired to build a staff of Christian networking within AIPAC. I appreciate
Mazel tov.
you. My question is, and looking at the folder, and I hope I'm wrong because I want to see a place where you're actually also talking about those cities and states who have taken positive action against the BDS movement. And if it's not in the book, I hope that you will at least talk about that in some of your points. And lastly, I understand the method and reason behind BDS. I understand them. Okay, they're doing their thing. But what I don't understand is when I read an article about a Jewish girl from Harvard who goes to Israel on a birthright tour and comes back and literally destroys Israel with her favoritism toward the Palestinians and how Israel is killing and murdering and stealing. I don't understand our own people turning against us like that?
Well, yes, there is a chapter on the book about support for Israel, and interwoven throughout the book, I talk about different municipalities and individuals. The focus of this book, however, and I thought for a moment I had written something about, the support for BDS and anti-Zionism in the American government. And I decided that I'd keep most of my focus on the entertainment industry, because that's really where my personal experience and expertise is. But in terms of the example you used about this girl who went to Harvard, I would say it wasn't the trip on Birthright that changed her. It was the 4 years in Harvard that changed her. So I think, I don't know the example, and I don't want to get in any trouble because I'm not, slandering anyone, but I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't some premeditation to all of that. And it's because we know what's happening with the indoctrination on our college campuses. And the other thing which is so essential, which is why I keep bringing it back, because what happened was horrible. We're really late to that game, to what's going on college campuses. And it's going to take, it's like turning around the Titanic to turn that around. We're not late when it comes to the cultural boycott campaign, because what that is doing, it is normalizing and justifying this to people outside of the college campuses. It's not just the Harvard elites. I mean, you're talking about a very important segment of society. Don't get me wrong, people who go to universities, they're going to be leaders in the future, and that's really dangerous and it's absolutely horrible. But what the cultural boycott campaign is, it talks to everybody in every language, everywhere around the world. These stories about the Rolling Stones, these stories about Demi Lovato, these stories about Lord, all of them, they get picked up and are heard all over the world, all over the world. And so they are normalizing and justifying it, so that when this college student comes back after already been totally primed, right? Goes there, comes back, now she could say, well, now I've witnessed it. It falls on familiar ears. Oh, I've heard that. I've heard that, right? That's why I really urge people, again, to go on the offense. There's a huge temptation, and I really empathize with it, to focus on facts and try to deny these allegations. Israel is not apartheid. Well, when you say that, what word stands out? What two words resonate in that sentence? Israel and apartheid. So it's much better to say BDS is a bigoted, anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish movement. Now what do you remember? Go on the offense. Again, it's really pretty simple, and it helps keep you straight in terms of it's so easy to get tempted to stray, and I also really encourage everyone, obviously you're free to discuss this with friends and families and educate people, but boy, when you do it in conjunction with celebrities, you then are reaching a much wider audience. People will click, people will look, people will read. Traditional media will pick up the story. It's really powerful. It's a very powerful tool, and we have to start using it right now.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. I know we have some more questions. Did you?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Getting me
Would you
before-
mind speaking in the mic so we could?
Sure.
Thanks.
Like this, okay. Before I explain on top.
It's this part.
This is good?
This is like the end of the part that would go around your ear.
Okay, like this, okay. Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Before I explain what I'm doing in relation to this question, I wanted to say I appreciate very much this point on the squad and the Democratic Party. This is a real thing that the Democratic Party has not rejected. And it contributes to the normalization of Jew hatred. So this is an important point, and it's a part of the middle-class left's cancel culture. The fact that most entertainers, which I was very happy to hear, and I did not know until the speaker said so, do not cancel their dates in Israel, I think is extremely important, and it points to the fact that this can be answered. Mm-hmm. And it's part of why, not the only reason, I oppose any banning within Israel of BDS supporters who visit from other countries. Because it can be answered.
I didn't hear that last comment.
I said it's part of why I oppose the banning within Israel of pro-BDS individuals who wish to visit from other countries. Because I believe it can be answered. It can be politically, rationally, scientifically answered and defeated on the basis of merits. And the fact that there's an Emory student right now who's the opposite of the one pointed to, who is standing up and saying, I will not be intimidated. She's the student government president at the Rollins School of Health at Emory. And she's been attacked for her position in defense of the right of Israel to exist, and slandered. And she's standing up. In the Atlanta Jewish Times, in fact, had an interview and an article about her just a few weeks ago in which she said, I am not going to be quiet about this. I intend to fight. So this is very important, and I'll be very, very quickly just say two things. The capitalist crisis in the world, although Jew hatred certainly millennia predates the capitalist crisis today, is the source of the increase in actions against Jews, increase of incidents of Jew hatred. And it's a mortal threat. Jew hatred is a mortal threat to the working class. I am a candidate, my name is Lisa Potash, for U.S. Senate on the Socialist Workers' Party ticket. And we don't think of this as a separate cause. We think the fight against Jew hatred is integral to the life and death questions facing the working class, to rebuild our unions, to break from the Democratic Party, form a Labor Party, and so forth. I just have a minute or two, but the reason it's a mortal threat is because Jew hatred is used to scapegoat instead of pointing to the real source of inflation, unemployment, racism, sexism, which is capitalism.
I hate to
So,
interrupt.
yeah.
But Atlanta Israel Coalition's a nonpartisan, non-denominational organization, and End Jew Hatred calls Jew hatred out on the left and the right. Absolutely. So I wouldn't say that it's a Democrat or a Republican issue. It's a human issue. What's going on here with Israel and the hatred, that's a human issue. It's not one side or the other. And Lana, if you have anything you want to add to that, please do.
No, I completely agree. We're right now, we're in this really horrible